did you come here? I told you not to show your face at my wedding.
Please, my daughter. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I only came to see you smile. Just once more.
The chandeliers burned like 1,000 golden suns, throwing fractured light across marble floors polished to mirror shine. A gospel choir swayed in ivory robes, their voices lifting hymns toward the vaulted ceiling where crystal drops trembled with each note. Cameras flashed in rhythmic bursts, journalists jostling for angles, Instagram influencers perfecting their shots, guests in designer agbadas and silk gowns holding champagne flutes that caught the light like liquid diamonds. This was the wedding of the year, perhaps the decade. And then, the sound. Not a word. Not a gasp. A slap. It cracked through the hall like lightning splitting an ancient baobab tree, silencing the choir mid-note, freezing every dancer mid-step. The champagne tray hit the floor, crystal exploding into 1,000 glittering pieces that scattered across white marble like stars dying in slow motion. The bride stood trembling, her hand still raised, fingers splayed as if she couldn't believe what they'd just done. Her wedding gown, imported French lace, encrusted with Swarovski crystals, worth more than some people earned in a lifetime, now bore a dark stain spreading across the bodice like a wound opening. Before her, an elderly woman in a simple catering apron swayed slightly, one weathered hand pressed to her cheek where the imprint of 5 fingers was already blooming red. Her head covering had slipped askew. Tears gathered in the corners of her eyes but didn't fall, as if even her body refused to humiliate her further. The bride's voice shattered the silence, shrill with rage. "You clumsy fool! Do you know what you've done? This dress costs more than you'll earn in your entire miserable life." The old woman's lips moved. "I'm sorry, my daughter. Please, But the bride wasn't finished. She stepped closer, her face twisted with contempt. "Don't call me your daughter. Know your place. You're here to serve, not to ruin things with your shaking hands and your Clara." The voice came from the entrance, quiet, but carrying the weight of collapsing mountains. Every head turned. The groom stood in the doorway, still in his suit from the photo session outside, his face drained of color. Behind him, groomsmen froze mid-stride. His best friend's phone slipped from trembling fingers. The groom's eyes moved from his bride to the elderly woman clutching her face, and something ancient and terrible shifted in his expression, the look of a man watching his entire world reshape itself in real time. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. This story doesn't begin here, in this golden hall among the wealthy and celebrated. It begins in red earth and morning mist, where poverty wore no makeup and dignity was measured in different currency entirely. The village woke with roosters and wood smoke, with children's laughter echoing off tin roofs and women balancing water buckets on journeys from the well. Here, wealth meant having enough cassava for tomorrow's meal. Success meant your children's bellies weren't hollow. Mama Ruth woke before dawn every day, as she had for 30 years. Her back bent like a question mark from decades of basket weaving, her fingers calloused and scarred from palm fronds that cut like razors. She worked in the half-light before sunrise, her hands moving with the muscle memory of survival. Weave, twist, fold, bind. Each basket sold for less than $1. She made 10 a day. Sometimes 12 if her fingers didn't bleed too badly. In the corner of their one-room mud house, her son slept on a mat she'd stitched from rice sacks. Daniel. Her only child. Her reason for breathing. His father had died when the boy was 3, collapsed in the yam fields during harvest season, dead before his body hit the ground. Heart attack, the doctor said, though Mama Ruth always suspected it was exhaustion, poverty, the slow murder of a man who worked himself into the grave trying to feed his family. She'd raised Daniel alone through drought and hunger, through years when the rains didn't come and years when they came too hard, flooding the crops and washing away what little they had. She'd endured whispers from village women who said a woman alone couldn't raise a proper man, that the boy would turn out useless without a father's hand. She proved them wrong through sheer force of will. Every morning, she fed him first, giving him the larger portion even when her own stomach cramped with hunger. She walked him to school barefoot because selling her only pair of shoes had paid for his books. She sat with him by candlelight while he studied, her own illiteracy a wall she couldn't climb, but she could hold the candle steady and tell him, "Read it again, my son, until you understand." When other boys his age were working in the fields, she insisted he stay in school. When neighbors mocked her for wasting resources on education, she smiled through her teeth and kept weaving baskets. "You'll be great one day," she told him on nights when he cried from hunger, from the shame of wearing patched clothes to school, from the weight of being poor in a world that measured worth in money. "But never let success make you forget your roots. Never let wealth rot your soul." The day his acceptance letter arrived from a university in the city, Mama Ruth stood in the village square and wept. Not from sadness, from the crushing weight of an impossible choice. The tuition was more than she'd earn in 5 years of basket weaving. Maybe 10. That night, she unwrapped the small cloth bundle hidden beneath her sleeping mat. Inside, her wedding ring. The only thing of value she owned. The only physical memory of her husband, of the day he'd promised her forever and meant it. She held it up to the candlelight, watching gold catch flame. Daniel saw her. "Mama, no. Please. I'll work. I'll wait. You'll go," she said quietly, firmly. "This ring kept me warm for 20 years. Your future will keep me warm forever." She sold it the next morning to the goldsmith in town. He offered half what it was worth. She took it without bargaining. The village mocked her. Foolish woman, selling her only treasure for a boy who'll forget her the moment he tastes city life. He'll marry some educated girl and be ashamed of his village mother. Mama Ruth smiled and kept weaving baskets. But late at night, alone in the darkness, she allowed herself to wonder, what if they're right? What if I'm sacrificing everything for nothing? She pushed the thought away and prayed instead. The city swallowed Daniel whole. Bright lights and car horns, crowds that moved like rivers, buildings that scraped the sky. He'd never seen anything like it. The university campus alone was larger than his entire village. He arrived with 1 bag, 3 shirts, and his mother's warning echoing in his skull. Work hard. Stay humble. Remember who you are. The other students noticed him immediately. The village boy with his patched bag and second-hand phone, who spoke English with a rural accent and didn't understand their references to American TV shows and European holidays. They didn't mock him to his face. The pity was worse. So Daniel disappeared. Not physically. He attended every class, sat in the front row, asked questions until the professors knew his name. But socially, he became a ghost. While other students partied on weekends, he worked night shifts at a petrol station. While they slept in on Saturdays, he was in the computer lab teaching himself to code. He slept in empty classrooms when rent was due. He ate once a day and called it fasting. He studied by candlelight during power outages and told himself it felt like home. His motivation wasn't ambition. It was debt. Every night before sleeping, he thought of his mother's hands, scarred, bleeding, weaving baskets in the dark. He thought of the gold ring she'd wrapped in cloth for 20 years, only to sell it for him. He thought of her bent back and her unfaltering belief that he could become someone. Failure wasn't an option. It was an insult to her sacrifice. In his second year, he started building something. An app. A simple idea born from a simple problem. His mother had once gotten lost in the nearest town, wandering for hours because she couldn't read street signs or use a smartphone properly. What if there was technology that helped people like Mama, he thought. People who the tech world forgets exist. He built it in stolen hours between classes and work shifts. A navigation app designed for the elderly, the illiterate, the ones left behind by the digital revolution. It used voice commands in local languages, simple icons instead of text, and a panic button that connected directly to family members. It was called Find Home. He launched it expecting nothing. Maybe his mother could use it. Maybe a few hundred downloads. It went viral. First in Nigeria, then across West Africa, then the continent. International tech blogs picked it up. Young African developer builds app for the forgotten. Investors called. Companies offered partnerships. Within a year, Daniel wasn't just a student anymore. He was one of the youngest CEOs in African tech. The money came in waves, first a trickle, then a flood. Contracts, investments, speaking fees. He moved into an apartment with electricity that didn't cut out, with running water and a bed that didn't sit on the floor. But the first thing he bought wasn't for himself. It was a car. And a plane ticket home. The village hadn't changed much. Same red earth, same tin roofs catching sunlight, same women walking from the well with buckets balanced on their heads. But the luxury car that rolled down the dirt road, that was new. Children ran alongside it, shouting. Adults stopped mid-task to stare. By the time Daniel parked in front of his mother's house, half the village had gathered. Mama Ruth emerged from her doorway, shading her eyes against the sun, confusion creasing her weathered face. Then she saw him. Her son. Her boy. Stepping out of a car worth more than every house in the village combined, wearing clothes she'd only seen in magazines, standing tall and strong and successful. Her knees buckled. Daniel caught her, wrapped his arms around her small frame, and whispered, "I came home, Mama. Just like I promised." She wept against his chest, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. The village women who'd mocked her gathered around, suddenly silent, suddenly remembering their own words. "You were right," one of them said quietly. "He didn't forget." Daniel pulled back, looked his mother in the eyes, and said the words he'd rehearsed 1,000 times. "Pack your things, Mama. You're never weaving another basket. You're coming to the city. I bought you a house." She tried to protest. "My son, I'm fine here. This is my home. You sold your wedding ring for my future. Now let me give you yours." The house he'd bought wasn't just a house. It was a mansion, 3 stories, gated compound, garden with flowers she'd never seen before. She had her own bedroom with an attached bathroom. A kitchen with appliances she didn't know how to use. A staff of 3 to help with cooking and cleaning. She cried the first night, overwhelmed by space and silence. But by the second week, something remarkable happened. Despite the luxury surrounding her, Mama Ruth remained exactly who she'd always been. She still woke before dawn. She insisted on cooking her son's meals herself, waving away the hired chef. She swept her own floors, prayed on her knees 3 times daily, and wore the same simple Ankara prints she'd worn in the village. Wealth couldn't touch her humility. Success couldn't corrupt her soul. When Daniel hired a driver and bought her expensive clothes, she thanked him politely and then donated most of it to the church. "I don't need things," she told him gently. "I only ever needed you to be happy and good." The domestic staff adored her. She learned their names, asked about their families, shared meals with them despite their protests. She treated the gardener's opinion with the same respect she gave Daniel's business partners. Poverty taught her dignity, Daniel told his friends. Wealth just gave her a bigger platform to show it. His mother became known in their upscale neighborhood, not as the CEO's mother, but as the kind woman who prayed for everyone, who stopped to help the security guard's sick child, who never forgot where she came from. She was content. And then Daniel fell in love. Clara entered his life like a hurricane wrapped in perfume and ambition. They met at a tech conference in Lagos. She was giving a presentation on digital marketing, commanding the stage in a red dress that cost more than his first month's rent in university. Brilliant, beautiful, educated abroad, fluent in 3 languages, connected to every important person in the industry. Daniel was smitten instantly. She laughed at his jokes, challenged his ideas, matched his ambition with her own. She understood his world in ways his village friends never could. She spoke his professional language. Within 3 months, they were inseparable. Within 6, he proposed. She said yes before he finished asking. The warning signs were there from the beginning, small cracks in the perfect facade. But Daniel was too in love to see them, or perhaps too desperate to believe someone like Clara could truly love someone like him. The first crack appeared on their second date. The waiter brought the wrong order, a simple mistake, easily fixed. But Clara's voice dropped into icy contempt. Do I look like someone who eats fried rice? Did I stutter when I ordered? Or are you just too stupid to listen? The young waiter stammered apologies, his ears burning red. Daniel laughed it off. He's new, Clara. It's fine. It's not fine, she said sharply. People like him need to learn their place. Otherwise they get comfortable making mistakes. Daniel shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. The second crack appeared when Clara visited his house for the first time. Mama Ruth had cooked all day, traditional dishes from the village, meals that carried memories of home. She served them herself, smiling warmly, excited to meet the woman her son loved. Clara picked at the food, her nose slightly wrinkled. She complimented it politely, but Daniel caught her whispering to him later, "Your mother's cooking is rustic. When we're married, maybe we should hire a proper chef. Someone trained." "My mother is a proper chef," Daniel said quietly. "You know what I mean. Someone with formal training. International cuisine. Your business associates won't want to eat village food." The third crack appeared during a family dinner. Mama Ruth wore her favorite ankara, bright patterns, traditional print, hand-stitched by her sister decades ago. She wore it with pride, with joy, with the confidence of a woman who knew her worth wasn't measured in designer labels. Clara arrived in Gucci, Prada heels clicking on the marble floor. She greeted Mama Ruth politely, hugged her appropriately, said all the right things. But Daniel caught the look, the way Clara's eyes swept over his mother's outfit with barely concealed disdain, the slight tightness around her mouth, the way she positioned herself at an angle that kept Mama Ruth out of the photos she posted to Instagram later. When they were alone, Clara said carefully, "Daniel, I love your mother. But, for the wedding, maybe we should hire a stylist for her? Just to make sure she looks appropriate. This is going to be a high-profile event. Lots of press. We need everyone to look the part." "The part of what?" "You know what I mean. Modern. Sophisticated. Like they belong in your world now." "She belongs in my world because she built my world," Daniel said, his voice harder than he intended. Clara backtracked quickly, sensing his anger. "Of course. I just meant, never mind. Forget I said anything. I'm just stressed about wedding planning." She kissed his cheek, smoothed his collar, changed the subject. And Daniel, desperate to believe in this love, chose to forget. The fourth crack appeared with the driver. Thomas had worked for Daniel for 2 years, reliable, kind, never late. He was saving money to send his daughter to nursing school, and Daniel paid him generously. One morning, Thomas arrived 5 minutes late due to traffic. Just 5 minutes. Clara was already in the car, checking her makeup in a compact mirror. When Thomas apologized, she didn't look up. "Do you think my time is worthless? That I have nothing better to do than wait for you?" "Madam, I'm very sorry. There was an accident on. I don't care about your excuses. Daniel pays you to be on time. If you can't do that, maybe he should find someone who can." Thomas fell silent, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Later, when Daniel heard about it, he pulled Clara aside. "He's a good man, Clara. He has a family. You can't speak to people that way." "I can speak however I want to people who work for me," she said coolly. "That's how you maintain respect. If you're too soft, they walk all over you. I thought a CEO would understand that. There's a difference between leadership and cruelty." She laughed, that beautiful laugh that had once made his heart race. "You're too kind, Daniel. It's sweet. But in this world, kindness gets mistaken for weakness. I'm just protecting your reputation." She kissed him, and the argument dissolved like sugar in rain. But Mama Ruth saw everything. She said nothing directly, that wasn't her way. But sometimes, late at night, she'd hold Daniel's hand and say quietly, "My son, make sure the person you marry sees people the way you do, not the way the world does. Love is important, but character is forever." "I love her, Mama." "I know. Just keep your eyes open. Sometimes love makes us blind to things we need to see. He assured her Clara was just stressed, just ambitious, just passionate. All the things he loved about her. Mama Ruth nodded and said nothing more. But she prayed harder. The wedding preparations consumed 6 months and a budget that could have fed Daniel's entire village for a decade. Clara wanted everything perfect. Imported flowers from Holland, a designer from Paris for her dress, a guest list that read like a who's who of Nigerian elite. CEOs, politicians, entertainment moguls, international journalists. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a statement. We're showing Africa what success looks like, Clara said, scrolling through seating charts on her tablet. This is our moment to shine. Daniel signed the checks and tried to care about flower arrangements and menu selections, and whether the napkins should be ivory or champagne. But his mind kept drifting to his mother, who seemed quieter than usual, more withdrawn. A week before the wedding, he found her in the garden at sunset, praying. "Mama, what's wrong?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I overheard Clara yesterday. She was on the phone with her wedding planner." Daniel's stomach tightened. "What did she say?" "She said." Mama Ruth's voice wavered. "She said I look old and useless in photographs. That I should maybe stay in the back during pictures, or skip some events. That she's trying to build a brand and I don't fit the aesthetic." The words hit Daniel like physical blows. "She said that. I'm not telling you this to cause problems, my son. I just..." She turned to him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I just want to make sure I'm not a burden. If me being there makes things harder for you, I can stay home. I can watch from..." "Stop." Daniel knelt beside her, taking her weathered hands in his. "You're not a burden. You're never a burden. You're the reason I'm here. You're the reason any of this exists." "But Clara..." "I'll talk to her." He did. That night. The fight lasted 2 hours. Clara denied it, then admitted it, then justified it. "I didn't mean it the way it sounds. I just meant she might be more comfortable not being in the spotlight. You know how media can be cruel. I was trying to protect her. By calling her old and useless." "I didn't say useless. I said, look, Daniel, this wedding is important. For both of us. I just want everything to be perfect. Is that so wrong?" The argument went in circles until both of them were exhausted. It ended with Clara crying, apologizing, promising to make it right. She'd have her stylist work with Mama Ruth. She'd make sure she felt included. She'd take 100 pictures with her if that's what Daniel wanted. "I love you," Clara whispered against his chest. "I'm sorry. Wedding stress is making me crazy. I don't even recognize myself." Daniel wanted to believe her. God, how he wanted to believe her. So he did. But Mama Ruth, when he told her everything was resolved, just nodded slowly and said, "I hope you're right, my son. I truly do." The wedding day arrived like a storm dressed in silk. The venue was a converted colonial mansion, white columns, sprawling gardens, a ballroom with ceilings high enough to echo prayers. 500 guests, 300 staff members, a gospel choir flown in from South Africa, a celebrity DJ, enough flowers to carpet an entire field. The press arrived in waves, entertainment journalists, lifestyle bloggers, television crews. This wasn't just Daniel and Clara's wedding. It was an event. A spectacle. A moment that would be dissected on social media for weeks. Mama Ruth dressed in her room with hands that trembled slightly. She'd chosen a traditional ankara, beautiful, hand-stitched, modest. Clara's stylist had offered to dress her, but Mama Ruth politely declined. She knew who she was. Knew what she represented. She looked at herself in the mirror, an old woman in a young world, a village mother at a society wedding. "Please, Lord," she whispered, "let this day be joyful. Let my son be happy. And give me the strength to smile no matter what comes." She didn't know yet that her prayer would be tested in ways she couldn't imagine. The ceremony was flawless. Clara descended the aisle like a vision. The dress alone had been featured in 3 magazines before the wedding. Cameras flashed, guests gasped, even the hardened journalists looked impressed. Daniel waited at the altar, tears streaming freely down his face. When Clara reached him, he whispered, "You're beautiful." She smiled. But her eyes were already scanning the crowd, counting important faces, measuring the moment's social media potential. The vows were exchanged. The rings slipped on. The pastor pronounced them married, and the ballroom erupted in applause. The reception began. This was where things started to unravel. Behind the scenes, chaos was brewing. The catering company had miscalculated. They were short 3 servers for a guest list of 500. The coordinator was on the phone, screaming at the agency, but nobody was available on such short notice. Plates were piling up in the kitchen. Drinks needed refilling. Guests were starting to notice the delays, whispering about the service. Mama Ruth was in the family holding room, watching through a crack in the door. She saw the stress on the coordinator's face, heard the panic in her voice. And she made a decision. "I can help," she said quietly, stepping into the kitchen. The coordinator looked up, startled. "Ma'am, you're the groom's mother. You should be. I'm a mother who knows how to serve. Give me an apron. But, please, I want my son's wedding to be perfect. Let me help." The coordinator hesitated, then relented. They were desperate. And Mama Ruth's face was kind and determined. She put on a server's apron, covered her ankara, and picked up a tray of champagne flutes. Nobody in the ballroom would know who she was. Just another face in the serving staff. Just another anonymous worker keeping the wealthy comfortable. She didn't mind. Service had never been beneath her. She moved through the crowd quietly, efficiently, offering champagne with a gentle smile. Some guests thanked her. Most didn't even see her. To them, servants were invisible, part of the furniture, not worth acknowledging. Mama Ruth served them all with dignity. And then she saw Clara. The bride was holding court in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by friends and photographers. Her dress caught the light with every movement, crystals glittering like stars. She was laughing, radiant, perfect. Mama Ruth's heart swelled with complex emotion. This was her son's choice. This was the woman who would share his life. She wanted so badly to love her. She approached with a tray of fresh champagne, intending to slip past unnoticed. But the floor was wet. Someone had spilled something earlier. Marble when wet becomes ice. Mama Ruth's foot slipped. Just slightly. Just enough. The tray tilted. One glass, just one, toppled forward. Champagne splashed across Clara's gown in a dark, spreading stain. Time seemed to stop. Clara looked down at her dress, at the liquid soaking into lace that cost more than a car, spreading like blood across white fabric. Then she looked up at the old woman holding the tray. For one moment, just one, there was a chance for grace. A chance for understanding. An accident, nothing more, easily forgiven. But Clara's face twisted with rage. "You clumsy fool," she shrieked, her voice cutting through music and conversation. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you know how much this costs?" Mama Ruth's hands trembled. She set the tray down carefully, her voice soft with genuine remorse. "I'm so sorry, my daughter. Please, forgive me. I didn't mean. Don't call me your daughter." Clara's voice rose higher, shriller. "You're just a servant. A useless old woman who can't even carry a tray properly. Look at this. Look at what you've done." The ballroom was silent now. Every conversation had stopped. 500 faces turned to watch. Mama Ruth's lips trembled. "Please, I'll pay for the cleaning. I'll." And that's when Clara's hand flew. The slap sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Mama Ruth's head snapped to the side. Her head wrap fell. The tray clattered to the floor, crystal exploding into glittering shrapnel. 4-3 heartbeats. Nobody moved. Mama Ruth stood frozen, one hand pressed to her burning cheek, tears gathering but refusing to fall. She didn't cry out, didn't fight back. Just stood there, absorbing the humiliation, the pain, the public degradation. Clara was still shouting, "Get out! Get out of my wedding! You're lucky I don't have you arrested. Do you know who I am? Do you know?" "Clara." The voice came from the entrance. Daniel. He'd been outside with the photographer, getting last shots in the garden. He'd heard the commotion and come running. Now he stood in the doorway, his face completely drained of color, his eyes moving from his bride to the old woman in the server's apron holding her face. The old woman whose Ankara print he recognized. The pattern his aunt had sewn. The dress his mother had worn 1,000 times. His mother. Clara had slapped his mother. In front of 500 people. At his wedding. The room held its breath. Daniel walked forward slowly, each step measured, controlled. He moved past his bride without looking at her, went directly to Mama Ruth, and gently, so gently, took her arm. "Mama," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Are you okay?" She looked up at him, tears finally spilling. "I'm sorry. I ruined her dress." "You didn't ruin anything." He turned her face slightly, saw the red mark blooming on her cheek, and something ancient and terrible shifted in his eyes. He removed her apron carefully, like he was handling something precious and fragile. Then he guided her to a chair, made sure she was seated, and only then, did he turn to face his bride. Clara's anger was evaporating into confusion. "Daniel," she spilled. "Do you know who you just hit?" His voice was quiet. Calm. The kind of calm that comes before earthquakes. Clara faltered. "She's just a server. She ruined my..." "Look at her." Something in his tone made Clara finally look, really look, at the old woman in the chair. Recognition dawned slowly. Horror followed close behind. "That's my mother," Daniel said, each word dropping like a stone into still water. "You just slapped my mother. In front of 500 guests. At our wedding." Clara's face went white. Then red. Then white again. I didn't know. She was wearing an apron. She looked like what? Like someone you could hit. Daniel's voice remained eerily calm. "Tell me, Clara, if you'd known it was my mother, would that have changed anything? Or would you have just hit her in private?" "Daniel, please. I didn't mean." "You meant every word you said. Every word I've been too blind to hear for months. Every insult to my driver, every condescending comment to the staff, every cruel remark about my mother's clothes, her cooking, her existence. I heard them. I just didn't want to believe them." He looked around the ballroom, at the guests frozen in shock, at the phones recording everything, at the world watching his private agony become public spectacle. And he made a choice. "This wedding is over," he said clearly, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. "Clara and I are not getting married. Not today. Not ever." The gasp that swept through the room sounded like wind through dry grass. Clara lunged forward, grabbing his arm. "No. Daniel, please. It was an accident. I was upset about the dress. You can't. I can't marry someone who thinks hitting an elderly woman is an acceptable response to a spilled drink." He removed her hand gently but firmly from his arm. "I can't marry someone who sees servants as less than human. I can't marry someone who doesn't understand that my mother, this woman who sold her wedding ring to pay for my education, who raised me alone through poverty and hunger, who taught me everything about dignity and grace, is worth more than 1,000 expensive dresses." He turned to Mama Ruth, who was crying silently now, shaking her head. "My son, don't ruin your happiness for me. I'm fine. Please. Mama, you taught me that how we treat people when we have power reveals who we really are. Today, Clara showed me exactly who she is. And I'm grateful. Better to know now than after a lifetime of regret." He helped his mother stand, wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and began walking toward the exit. Behind them, Clara collapsed into her bridesmaid's arms, sobbing hysterically. Guests stood in shocked silence. Cameras flashed. The choir stood frozen, hymns dying in their throats. At the door, Daniel paused and turned back one final time. My mother volunteered to help serve because she overheard Clara calling her old and useless. She put on that apron because she wanted my wedding to be perfect, even if the bride didn't want her in the pictures. She served champagne to people who didn't even see her because that's who she is, someone who gives without asking for recognition. His voice grew harder. Clara slapped her not knowing who she was. But that's exactly the point. It shouldn't matter who she was. She's a human being. She deserved respect regardless of whether she was my mother or a stranger. The fact that Clara only seems horrified now that she knows the truth tells me everything I need to know. He looked at Clara one last time. I hope you learn something from this. I really do. But you'll learn it without me. And then he was gone, his mother leaning against him, both of them walking out of the golden ballroom into the night. Behind them, the wedding of the year crumbled into ruins. The video went viral within hours. Not the official wedding photographer's footage, those beautiful curated shots designed for Instagram perfection. No, it was the cell phone videos, the shaky, raw footage from guests who'd witnessed everything. Bride slaps groom's mother at lavish wedding, screamed the headlines. The video spread across WhatsApp, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. It jumped continents. It sparked debates in every language. It became the story everyone was talking about. In offices, in churches, in taxicabs, in university classrooms. The internet had opinions. Lots of them. Some defended Clara. It was the heat of the moment. She didn't know. Everyone makes mistakes. But most didn't. This is what happens when you marry someone for their looks instead of their character. That old woman's dignity after being slapped. She didn't curse, didn't fight back, just stood there. That's strength. I don't care how expensive your dress is. You don't hit an elderly person. Period. Daniel did the right thing. Imagine if he'd married her. Imagine what kind of mother she'd be to his children. Within a week, Clara's world imploded. Her influencer sponsors dropped her. Her marketing consultancy lost clients. Her social media accounts, once filled with aspirational lifestyle content, became war zones of comments she couldn't delete fast enough. She tried to apologize. Posted a tearful video explaining she'd been stressed, overwhelmed, not herself. The internet didn't forgive. She tried to disappear. Deleted her accounts, changed her number, moved to a different neighborhood. But the story followed her. In Nigeria, stories like this don't fade. They become cautionary tales told to children, warnings whispered at weddings, lessons passed down through generations. Remember that girl who slapped her mother-in-law at her own wedding? Clara became a name that meant shame. Meanwhile, Daniel did something unexpected. Instead of hiding from the scandal, he leaned into the lesson. A week after the wedding he held a press conference. Mama Ruth sat beside him, quiet and dignified in her simple Ankara. My mother taught me that dignity isn't about wealth or status, Daniel said to the cameras. It's about how you treat people, especially those who can't benefit you. Today, I'm announcing a new foundation, Ruth's Hands. We'll support elderly women who've been abandoned, abused, or forgotten by society. Women who raised families alone, who sacrificed everything for their children, who deserve to live their final years with dignity and comfort. The cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. Mama Ruth spoke then, her voice soft but steady. I don't want what happened to me to be about revenge or bitterness. I want it to be about change. About remembering that every elderly person you see, the cleaner, the security guard, the woman selling oranges by the road, is someone's mother. Someone's father. They deserve respect regardless of what they can give you. The interview went viral too. But this time for different reasons. Donations poured into Ruth's hands. From small amounts, students sending 500 naira, to large corporate sponsorships. Within 3 months, they'd opened their first shelter for elderly women in Lagos. Within 6 months, 3 more across Nigeria. Mama Ruth became a symbol, not of victimhood, but of grace under pressure, of dignity that couldn't be stripped away by cruelty. She visited schools, telling her story. "I could have cursed that girl when she hit me," she told wide-eyed students. "I could have screamed, fought back, made a scene. But my mother taught me that how you respond to cruelty says more about you than about the person being cruel. A slap fades, but respect lost can take a lifetime to heal." Daniel threw himself into work, both his company and the foundation. Some nights, Mama Ruth would find him at his desk at 2 a.m., staring at spreadsheets with exhausted eyes. "Are you running from something, my son?" He looked up. "Maybe. I don't know. I thought I knew her, Mama. I thought love was enough." "Love is never enough without character," she said gently. "You can love someone and still recognize they're not right for you. That's wisdom, not failure. Do you think she'll ever change?" Mama Ruth was quiet for a long moment. "I pray she does. But not for your sake. For hers. Carrying that much pride, that much contempt for others. It's a heavy burden. It will crush her eventually, unless she learns to put it down." Daniel nodded. "Do you forgive her?" "I forgave her the moment it happened. Forgiveness isn't about whether someone deserves it. It's about whether you deserve to be free from bitterness." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean letting people keep hurting you. You did the right thing, walking away." For 6 months, Clara disappeared from public life entirely. She moved to a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood. Got a job at a regular office. Nothing glamorous, nothing that required a public profile. Kept her head down. Learned what it felt like to be invisible. She'd lost everything. Her reputation, her business, her social standing, her fiancé. Everything. At first, she was angry. Angry at Daniel for humiliating her publicly. Angry at the internet for never letting her forget. Angry at the world for being so unforgiving. But anger, held long enough, eventually burns itself out. One day, scrolling through news on her phone, she saw an article about Ruth's hands. They were opening a new shelter in Abuja. The photo showed Mama Ruth cutting a ribbon, surrounded by elderly women, faces weathered by time and hardship, eyes bright with gratitude. The woman Clara had slapped was now helping hundreds of women just like her. Something cracked open inside Clara's chest. She started volunteering. Anonymously at first, she wore a head wrap that covered her face, used a different name, showed up early and left late when fewer people were around. She cleaned floors, washed dishes, helped elderly women bathe and dress, fed those too weak to feed themselves. It was humbling work. Invisible work. The kind of work she'd once considered beneath her. And slowly, so slowly she barely noticed, it began changing her. She learned the women's names. Heard their stories. Mama F, who'd been abandoned by her children after her husband died. Sister Grace, who'd been evicted from her home at 73 because she couldn't pay rent. Auntie Blessing, who'd raised 6 children alone and now had dementia, forgotten by the very people she'd sacrificed everything for. Each story was a mirror showing Clara who she'd been becoming. Someone who saw people as useful or useless. Someone who measured worth in money and status. Someone who would have become one of those children who abandoned their elderly parents when they stopped being convenient. The woman who'd slapped Mama Ruth would have walked past all these women without seeing them. The woman Clara was becoming couldn't stop seeing them. One evening, after 3 months of volunteering, she arrived at the shelter and found Mama Ruth there. Clara froze. Turned to leave. "Wait," Mama Ruth called gently. "I know it's you, Clara." Clara's whole body went rigid. Of course she knew. How long had she known? "Please," Mama Ruth continued. "Stay. Let's talk." They sat in the shelter's small garden, just the two of them, surrounded by flowers and the distant sound of evening prayers. "How long have you known?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Since the first week. One of the staff recognized you." Mama Ruth smiled gently. "But you were working so hard to help. I thought it would be cruel to expose you." "I don't." Clara's voice cracked. "I don't know how to apologize for what I did. There aren't words big enough. I know. I've been such a terrible person. I treated people like they were nothing. Like they only mattered if they could do something for me. I was becoming." She couldn't finish. "A monster," Mama Ruth supplied gently. "No, my child. Just someone who'd lost her way. Who'd been taught that success meant stepping on others to rise higher. That's not monstrousness. That's just pain, dressed up as pride." Clara looked up, tears streaming. "How can you be kind to me? After what I did? Because holding on to anger would hurt me more than it hurts you. And because..." Mama Ruth reached over, took Clara's hand. "Because I see what you're doing here. You're trying to become better. That takes more courage than most people ever find. I don't deserve your forgiveness. None of us deserve grace. That's what makes it grace." Mama Ruth squeezed her hand. "But here's what I need you to understand. I forgive you. Completely. But that doesn't mean you and Daniel should be together. Some things break in ways that can't be repaired, and that's okay. You can be forgiven and still live with consequences. Both things are true." Clara nodded, crying harder now. "I know. I don't want him back. I want to be someone who wouldn't do what I did. I want to be someone who sees people. Really sees them. Then keep doing what you're doing. Keep serving. Keep learning. Keep becoming." They sat in silence for a while, two women connected by pain and the slow, difficult work of healing. Finally, Clara whispered, "What you said after I hit you. May heaven forgive you. Why did you say that?" "Because I knew you'd need it more than I needed revenge. I was praying for your soul, not cursing it." Clara wept then, deep, heaving sobs that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and broken inside her. Mama Ruth held her like a mother holds a wounded child, letting her cry, letting her release years of poison and pride. When Clara finally looked up, her face was swollen but somehow clearer. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing something in me worth saving. Everyone is worth saving, my daughter. Even when they've forgotten it themselves." A year passed. Clara continued working at the shelter, eventually becoming a full-time staff member. She sold her expensive clothes, her designer bags, everything that represented her old life. Used the money to expand Ruth's hands. She started a program specifically for elderly domestic workers, women who'd spent their lives serving others and now had nothing to show for it. She fought for their pensions, their health care, their dignity. The media eventually found out who she was. There was a brief resurgence of the story. The bride who slapped a mother now runs shelter for the elderly. Some people said she was just rehabilitating her image. Others said it was performative redemption. But the elderly women at the shelter knew better. "That girl has changed," Mama F said firmly when reporters asked. "She scrubs our toilets. She holds our hands when we're scared. She cries with us. That's not performance. That's transformation." Daniel heard about Clara's work. Mama Ruth told him, gently, one evening over dinner. "She's doing good work," his mother said. "Real work. I thought you should know." Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then, "I'm glad. I really am. I never wanted her destroyed. I just couldn't marry her." "I know, my son. Do you think I should reach out? Acknowledge what she's doing?" Mama Ruth considered. "Not yet. Let her do this work for its own sake, not for your approval. If she's truly changed, she'll understand that some relationships end, and that's okay. Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. Daniel nodded. You're very wise, Mama. She laughed. I'm just old. Sometimes people mistake that for wisdom. 18 months after the wedding that never was, Ruth's Hands held its annual fundraising gala. It was a major event. Government officials, celebrities, corporate sponsors. Daniel gave the keynote speech about the importance of caring for elderly populations. Clara was there, working behind the scenes, coordinating volunteers, making sure the elderly women who were guests of honor were comfortable and cared for. She and Daniel saw each other from across the room. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Two people who'd shared a future that never happened, who'd hurt each other and been hurt, who'd both grown in the ruins of what they'd lost. Daniel nodded slightly. Clara nodded back. And that was enough. No tearful reunion. No dramatic reconciliation. Just quiet acknowledgement. I see you. I see who you've become. I'm glad you're here, doing this work. Later, when Clara was helping Mama Blessing into a car, she felt someone beside her. Mama Ruth. You're doing beautiful work, the older woman said softly. I learned from the best, Clara replied. No. You learned from your pain. That's a harder teacher, but a more thorough one. They stood together for a moment, watching the elderly women leave, faces bright with joy, stomachs full, hearts lighter. Do you think? Clara started, then stopped. What, child? Do you think people can really change? Fundamentally. Mama Ruth smiled. I think people can become who they were always meant to be, once they stop pretending to be who the world told them to be. You're not becoming someone new, Clara. You're finally becoming yourself. Clara felt something settle in her chest. Not quite peace, but close. The beginning of it. Thank you, she whispered, for giving me a chance to learn. For not destroying me when you could have. Destroying you would have destroyed part of me too. We're all connected, my daughter. Your pain, my pain, the pain of every woman in this shelter. It's all the same pain. We heal each other by refusing to add more pain to the world. Mama Ruth squeezed her hand, then walked away to greet more guests. Clara stood alone for a moment, watching the city lights blur through her tears. She'd lost everything 18 months ago. Her status, her reputation, her future. But she'd gained something more valuable, a conscience, a purpose, a understanding of what really mattered. The slap had echoed around the world. But in its wake came something unexpected, redemption. Not cheap redemption, bought with apologies and PR. Real redemption, earned through years of service, through humility learned in the trenches of caring for others. The story didn't end with a wedding. It ended with something more profound. Transformation. The shelter in Abuja was the 7th Ruth's Hands facility, the largest yet. The opening ceremony was packed. International press, government ministers, representatives from the African Union. Mama Ruth cut the ribbon, her hands steady despite her 72 years. The building would house 50 elderly women, provide medical care, job training for their families, legal support. Daniel stood beside her, now one of Africa's most respected tech CEOs, not just for his wealth, but for his values. His company had a reputation for treating workers with dignity. He'd become known for it. Clara stood in the back, wearing simple clothes, her hair natural, no makeup. She was director of programs now for Ruth's Hands. She'd earned the position through 3 years of work so dedicated that even skeptics became believers. She'd never married, didn't date, poured everything into the work. Some people said she was punishing herself. Mama Ruth knew better. She's finding herself, the old woman said when people asked. Some people need a lifetime to do that. She's just doing it faster because she fell harder. After the ceremony, as the crowd mingled, a young woman approached Clara, a journalist from South Africa. Miss Clara, can I ask you something personal? Clara hesitated, then nodded. Do you regret what happened? The slap, the wedding, all of it. Clara was quiet for a long moment. I regret the person I was, the pain I caused, The humiliation I put Mama Ruth through. She looked across the room at the elderly woman laughing with a group of shelter residents. But do I regret the journey it put me on? No. I was becoming someone terrible. That slap, that moment, it saved me from myself. It destroyed the life I was building on rotten foundations so I could build something real. Do you think you and Daniel will ever? No, Clara said firmly but gently. And that's okay. Not every story ends with romance. Some end with something better. Becoming the person you were meant to be. Daniel was right to walk away. I'm grateful he did. The journalist scribbled notes. What would you say to someone who's facing public humiliation right now? Someone whose worst moment went viral. Clara thought about all the nights she'd wanted to die, wanted to disappear, wanted to undo everything. She thought about the slow, painful climb back to personhood. I'd say, let it break you. Really break you. Don't try to rebuild who you were. That person is gone. Use the pieces to build someone better. And know that redemption isn't quick. It's not an apology post or a PR campaign. It's years of showing up, doing the work nobody sees, becoming humble enough to serve. But it's possible. If you really want it, it's possible. That night, long after everyone had gone home, 3 people sat in the shelter's garden under stars that seemed close enough to touch. Mama Ruth, Daniel, and Clara, connected by pain, separated by history, bound by the strange alchemy of forgiveness. I'm proud of you both, Mama Ruth said quietly. My son, for knowing his worth and walking away from something beautiful but broken. And you, Clara, for having the courage to become someone new. Clara's voice was thick with emotion. I robbed you both of a wedding. Of a family. Of. No, Daniel said, speaking directly to her for the first time in 3 years. You freed us from a marriage that would have been poison. You freed yourself from becoming someone irredeemable. Sometimes destruction is mercy in disguise. Do you hate me? Clara asked, barely whispering. I did. For a while. Daniel's voice was honest, gentle. But watching what you've built, who you've become. No. I don't hate you. I respect you. And I'm grateful, for the lesson you taught me, for the work you're doing now, for proving that people can change if they want it badly enough. They sat in comfortable silence, 3 people who'd traveled through fire and emerged transformed. Finally, Mama Ruth spoke. You know what I've learned from all this? That slap that echoed around the world, it wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning. The beginning of Daniel learning to value character over beauty. The beginning of Clara learning to value people over status. The beginning of thousands of elderly women getting the care they deserve. She stood slowly, her body tired but her spirit bright. Sometimes God uses our worst moments to create our greatest transformations. Not always. But sometimes. If we're brave enough to learn instead of defend. If we're humble enough to change instead of justify. She blessed them both, her son with a kiss on the forehead, Clara with a hand on the shoulder, and walked inside, leaving them under the stars. Daniel and Clara sat for a moment longer. I should go, Clara said finally. Clara. She paused. Thank you. For the work you do here. For honoring my mother through service instead of just words. That means everything. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and walked away. Daniel watched her go, this woman who'd almost become his wife, who'd instead become something more valuable, a partner in purpose, if not in life. He pulled out his phone and called someone. His mother answered on the second ring. Mama, I just wanted to say thank you. For what, my son? For teaching me that dignity can't be stripped away by cruelty. For showing me what real strength looks like. For saving me from a marriage that would have destroyed me. Her voice was warm with love. You saved yourself, my child. I just showed you what you already knew. After hanging up, Daniel sat alone in the garden, thinking about weddings that never happen and destinies that change in a heartbeat. His phone buzzed. A notification. Ruth's hands had just received their largest donation yet. enough to open 3 more shelters across West Africa. The message accompanying it, from Anonymous. In honor of a mother's grace and a bride's transformation. Daniel smiled. Some stories don't end with happily ever after. They end with something more profound, healed enough to help others heal. And sometimes, that's the better ending. This story traveled around the world because it touched something universal. The question of what we do when someone we love disrespects our parents. Of whether beauty without character is worth anything. Of whether redemption is possible for people who've done terrible things. But underneath it all is a simpler truth. Everyone you meet is carrying a story. The cleaner, the driver, the elderly woman at the market. They're someone's mother, someone's hero, someone's entire world. How you treat them when they can't benefit you, that's who you really are. Mama Ruth didn't need wealth to have dignity. She carried it in her bones, in her spirit, in the way she served others without needing recognition. Daniel didn't need a wife who looked perfect. He needed one who saw people clearly. And Clara didn't need forgiveness to begin healing. She just needed to stop running from her shame and start walking towards something better. Now it's your turn. Would you forgive someone who publicly disrespected your mother? Or would you cut them off forever? Drop your honest answer below. Comment your country. Let's see where respect for elders is still sacred. And most importantly, when did you last tell your mother you love her? Not on a special day. Just because she's still here, still breathing, still the woman who gave you life. Call her tonight. Text her now. Don't wait until it's too late to say thank you for everything she sacrificed. Because somewhere in this story, in Mama Ruth's bent back, in her sold wedding ring, in her quiet dignity, is your mother's story too. Subscribe to Folktale Window for more stories that make you think, feel, and remember where you came from. Because in the end, we're all just trying to become people our mothers would be proud of. And that's the only success that really matters.